A serendipitous rebirth opportunity from Zululand to Thailand. The eagle has the longest lifespan of its species. It can live up to 70 years. But to reach this ripe old age, it has to make some tough decisions. In its 40th year, its long flexible talons can no longer grab prey, which serves as food. Its long sharp beak begins to bend. Its old aged heavy wings, due to their thick feathers, stick to its chest, making it difficult for it to fly. Then the eagle is left with only two options: to die or go through a painful process of change. The process requires that the eagle flies to a mountain top and sit on its nest. There it knocks its beak against a rock until it plucks it out. Then the eagle will wait for a new beak to grow for it to then pluck out its talons. When the new talons grow back, the eagle starts plucking out its thick, heavy feathers. A new set of new feathers starts growing again until it's completely renewed, both in spirit and in flesh. And after this, the eagle takes on its famous flight of rebirth and lives for another 30 prosperous years. Well, this pretty much sums up my life story, juxtaposing it with the process that I embarked upon since June this year, 2017. Steve Jobs said, "We can only connect the dots when looking back." He was referring to the wisdom of hindsight. Looking back, as I sit here on the porch of Frangipani Living Arts Hotel in Phnom Penh, reflecting on my personal transformation process, I can be tempted to start sounding like I had it all figured out when I faced my demons and set sail to Southeast Asia. Disturb us, O Lord, when we have reached our destiny, because we sailed too close to the shore. That's a prayer I prayed throughout this journey, an excerpt from my book, If the Shoe Fits. Ulundi, my hometown in Zululand, which is tucked neatly below the Ondini mountain range on the northeastern part of South Africa, is not less than 9,054 kilometers away from this Southeast Asian Khmer city of Phnom Penh in Cambodia, while Bangkok in Thailand is a long 8,781 kilometers away. That is quite a stretch for a former cattle herder, both mentally and physically. At the end of May this year, it was either I go crazy and be officially declared a raving lunatic, or I face my demons and embark on this self-renewal process, which started out as a virtually impossible mission. I remember when it finally dawned on me in late April and early May this year that I had failed on an epic scale, as I would sit alone in my office on 31 Marshall Street in downtown Johannesburg, as I call it now, looking at yet another unpaid rent statement from my landlord, City Property. Almost everything that I had collapsed. The business networking breakfast, online bookshop, the cooperative bank concept I was developing, mountaintop experiences, venture capital business, and the after-school math tutorial classes in Atteridgeville, Pretoria, had all dissipated into thin air in what felt like quicksand on a horrid Namibian desert. The only thread of hope I had lay buried in the South Sea router I owned, my most prized earthly possession. It was loaded with 100 gigs of data, which they told me would expire in a year's time. Data in South Africa is what water is to the San people of the Kalahari. It is scarce, very expensive, and yet without it, your life is virtually cut out from the rivers of life in the expansive terrain of virtuosity. It allowed me an opportunity to spend my early mornings and late nights on YouTube, Google, and many other sources of information that I could feast my mind upon, and broaden my scope of what I thought was possible for me. It was during this period that my understanding of the I am affirmations got reinforced. I was insanely curious. I dug deeper and deeper into it. In a few days, I had formulated my own. I am so happy and grateful now that I have an opportunity to start afresh in life. I am so happy and grateful now that my world has expanded. I am so happy and grateful now that my circle of compassion is 3 degrees bigger and deeper. And while saying these affirmations, my cheeks would visit my ears and I would feel some warmth in my chest. Yet I had no clue how all these would manifest, but I said them anyway. I told myself it was none of my business to know how it would happen. I believed it would happen. I then started compiling a list of the kind of experiences I would like to have going forward. One of them was walking out of an Emirates aircraft with my backpack clutched on my shoulders, saying shukra, which is an Arabic expression for gratitude to those beautiful air hostesses, as I imagined myself landing somewhere in the Middle East. I continued challenging myself and asked what it is that I would have to learn in order for all these movies that were playing in my head for them to come true. The answer was simple and straightforward. Go ahead and tell my story, which meant I had to learn to stop hiding my head in the sand, but rather invite other people into my life by asking for help, which didn't come that easily to me. After I had let so many people down with those business ventures that had failed, I told myself that from then on, the only help I was going to receive would be an act of serendipity. Then finally, I compiled a list of things I would do to help others who might be going through what I was experiencing or felt stuck in their lives or had hit the ceiling and felt suffocated or stagnated. It looked something like this. Go back to Kwaceza in Zululand, to that school where out of an enrollment of 958 learners, 68 of grade 10 to 12 girls were pregnant, and the fathers were migrant laborers in Johannesburg factories. Help them make a U-turn in life and reimagine themselves. Invite all those old ladies from Emateni who have to brave the cold winter mornings to go harvest the Ikwani grass from St. Lucia Bay, which they use to make floor mats and sell to tourists so they can send their kids to school. Teach them how to form social enterprises so they can prosper. The third one was, gather all the unemployed youth in Mapopoma, where my great-grandfather used to farm, and teach men and youngsters skills of how they can produce food for themselves and stop relying on retailers for almost everything while they have access to land. That's just some of it. A lot of things happened in between, as you would understand, but that's just the process. That's what the process brought me to. A close friend of mine called me and said there was this conference that was going to be taking place in Sandton, Johannesburg. A certain American lady who is now based in Bangkok was going to be there. He said she would be in town for a few days and he would like to introduce me to her. A few weeks later, it happened. I met Courtney Savvy Lawrence. She had this verve which I found very intriguing. And I told myself, whatever she was on, I wanted a piece of that action as well. That's how I got introduced to Designing for Social Innovation and Leadership Academy. She shared a lot of details about how the 2017 DSIL course was structured and that I could apply if I wanted to. The most exciting part about it was that we would start off with virtual classes online with people from all over the world. and then seal it off with a field trip to Southeast Asia, that is Thailand and Cambodia, where we would work with social entrepreneurs in those countries and consolidate on all the stuff we were learning online. I said, I'm in, bring it on, sister. And I did exactly that. I didn't even bother myself about how much it would cost. I followed my gut feel. I had this strong conviction that my destiny was tied to this adventure, and that would serve as a springboard which would catapult my career development into another level. When all of this happened, I had shut everything down and had registered a training and development company called Knowledge Connections. And I applied. And at the end of July, I received the official acceptance letter into the program. To say the least, I would say I was elated. I was beyond happy. Things were falling into place. My first test, my first taste of affirmation. I was in Port Edward, actually, on the East Coast, on the South Coast, when I received this email that changed my life. In an internet cafe next to that windy road to Bizana, not so far from the Wild Coast Sun, where all the big-time gambling happens in South Africa. Kind of cathartic, if you think about it. I hurried back to Johannesburg on an overnight 10-hour bus ride and sold everything I owned. Well, almost everything I owned. And that included 2,000 plus books I had been hoarding for years. I closed the office, I sold the furniture, I gave electronic equipment to my children and only kept a laptop and my treasured Wi-Fi router. I gave away 80% of my clothes to homeless people in the CBD, paid off all my pressing debts, and contacted almost everyone else that I could not pay off and agreed on new repayment terms. I even went ahead and called myself a minimalist, out of desperation actually, to justify what I was doing by finding an acceptable label for it. This was the beginning of a journey that saw me beg and borrow, write letters upon letters, attend meetings back and forth, pull some stunts on social media, approach several statesmen in our parliament in Cape Town, speak on regional and national radio stations, writing to magazines and newspapers with no response, walking to the Thai embassy in Pretoria, running out of money to even continue making calls, being homeless, and having nowhere to sleep, and finally, taking an overnight taxi ride back home to Ulundi on a shoestring budget with all what remained of my earthly belongings stacked on my lap, calling relatives and friends, wishing I had a rich aunt or uncle through whom I could find solace in what had become a long, arduous task that bore very little fruit. I did everything that was humanly possible. No matter how much I tried, I was the subject for gossip and ridicule, which was marinated with all other forms of rejection you can think of. It didn't matter to me. I had been accepted into the 2017 DSIL, and that was more than enough to keep my heart pumping at the rhythm of my dreams. I needed 69,000 rand. It was exactly, to be exact, let me put it this way. It was 69,022 rand 90 cent, which is, in US dollar terms, it is $5,055. According to this exchange rate today, well, those are the figures. That covers the fees. It excludes the 1,000 US dollar contribution from the UN. And also, I had to then find money for my own travel expenses, for my accommodation, and all other peripheral costs. So I needed a total of an extra 27,000 over and above the 69,000. 27,308 rand 76 cent. That's the exact figure that I needed. And in US dollars, that's 2,000. That would cover the field trip to Southeast Asia, which is where all the magic was going to be happening, while the series of virtual classes was on until December. I had the whole of August, after the extension of the due date, to raise the funds. I only raised a lousy 19,500 rand. That is just over $1,000, which included 6,000 rand that came in when I landed in Bangkok, after all the trouble. To put salt to this new wound I had, it came in dribs and drabs from many sources. I welcomed it, and I kept telling myself that it would all add up. It cost me a further 2,000 rand plus to raise funds, which is just over $170. Just like the famous virgins in the Bible, I also had to burn some oil while waiting in faith. The field immersion was due to start on Friday, the 22nd of September in Bangkok, Thailand. I had some tough decisions to make. I had got my back against the wall. There was nowhere else for me to turn to. The only way was just forward. So, forward and upward, I bravely marched on. On the Saturday preceding the Wednesday I had planned to leave, I left Ulundi and went on the 13-kilometer drive up to Johannesburg using public transport. I checked into a $16 a night hotel near Park Station and stayed there until Tuesday morning, hoping to raise more funds while I was in the city. Back home, I had been promised sponsorship by some government structure, which I do not think it would be necessary for me to name and shame, but had never came through for me. All that happened was blame shifting, passing the buck, no one willing to be held accountable for signing off on something that appeared to have no direct and immediate benefit for the political party heading the structure concerned. I was not deterred. I left that door open because in my vocabulary, words like impossible, unrealistic, too soon, they just simply do not exist. I remained resolute and determined to get to Thailand, with or without their help. Something strong within me felt like this opportunity was an opportunity of a lifetime. And I could not afford to miss it. And if I did, what story would I tell my grandchildren one day? So on Tuesday morning, I checked out of Park Station Hotel and called my ex-wife, asking her if I could spend the night, my last night in South Africa, with her and the kids. She said yes, and even offered to cook us my favorite meal, which is beef stew. Meanwhile, I only had just under $10, which is, less than 120 rand in my pocket, which was enough to buy beef and veggies and be left with only 30 rand, $2 for the taxi ride to Omonde, 10 minutes out of the city. I had spent all the money I had raised on buying a return ticket from Phnom Penh to Bangkok because the SIL fees were going to cover the one-way trip from Thailand to Cambodia. Coming back was my business. I also bought travel medical insurance. I paid for my last night in Bangkok on the 21st as I planned, plus small logistics in between. I didn't have tickets from OR Tambo International to Suvarnabhumi International Airport in Bangkok, and I was supposed to fly out the following day. Did I ever say to myself I was not going anymore? Never! Did I ever have any doubt? Of course, yes. I did have doubts. Several times, actually. So I would I'd just sleep whenever such negativity attacked me. And I would wake up feeling better, refreshed, and rejuvenated again. My son was so excited to see me after 3 weeks of absence. My daughter, who is more of a pragmatist like her mother, took a stance that said, I will chill around these streets here and see where this whole thing leads to. We had such a good time together. I woke up early, very early on the 20th, and said my I am affirmations. I said my goodbyes, and by 5:30 that morning, I was out of the house, got to town, still saying my I am affirmations, and 5 minutes before I jumped off the taxi on Rebirth Street to get to Park Station, the bus terminal, which was the only place that I felt was safe to sit and carry on making calls at that time of the morning, I received a call from an old colleague saying he's sorry about responding so late into my campaign and so on. And he said, you know what, my brother, I'm sending you 1,000 rand just right now. I'm sending it through to you. That's like $73. I was like, wow, bring it on, brother. So he was sent it right away through Standard Bank's instant money. I was over the moon. I got off the taxi and went straight into Park Station and then took another taxi from the CBD to Kempton Park, and it dropped me off at the airport. When I got to the airport, I went into the international departures section. Even though I did not have the ticket, I wanted to just immerse myself into that energy space and start experiencing what it would be like for me in a few hours. I logged into my Facebook account and checked in and declared that I was at OR Tambo International, which I was, and said I was flying off to Suvarnabhumi International Airport in Bangkok, which I strongly believed was going to happen. I just believed it. Within minutes, people were congratulating me, including people who had never believed it was going to happen. I went into one of the coffee shops and ordered breakfast while I transferred half of what I had received from my friend to my ex-wife for the kids. As long as I had access to the internet and had money for airtime and food, I was going to be fine. So I sat there, I carried on with the calls, which was hard because I had already said on Facebook I was going, and people assumed I had raised all the funds required and therefore didn't need any help. I got all sorts of questions you can think of. I just laughed it off and told myself, they don't believe what I believe. They don't know what I know. It was hard. It was very hard. It's hard when out of desperation you start making calls. You're calling just about anyone and everyone on your phone, even people who are broke like you. It's hard when people who are broke, people who are poor, call you poor. It hits right at the core of your beliefs. It hits at the core of your beliefs when they laugh at you. It hits at the core of your belief when they say, you are broke. What the hell are you doing? Why don't you just go for those free online courses? No money came through. Nothing. Zilch. Around 4:30 that afternoon, two things had happened. Two guys in Durban who had attended one of my business networking breakfasts early this year called me and said they had just deposited 1,500 rand and 3,000 rand respectively, giving me a total of 4,500 rand, which is just over $329. My heart started beating faster. My laptop was on and I was busy on the internet checking ticket prices and pretending like I was making bookings. And when the process got to that part where I had to give my Visa card details, I would log out and start again. So when these calls came through, I immediately logged into travelstart.co.za and looked for the cheapest one-way ticket I could find. I was so fortunate. I stumbled upon a Kenyan Airways flight that was leaving the following day at just after 5 in the evening. It was available for $325, which with taxes and other costs, it worked out to be 4,441 Rand 41 cent. A very close margin. I bought it and had nothing left in my bank account. And within 2 hours, I received a confirmation email to say, there is your ticket. So with all the details, it was there. This meant I had to stick around until the following day, after having spent a good 10 hours at the airport, and then now another 24 hours. I couldn't afford to go back to Omonde to my kids. I had to stay at the airport. At around 10 that night, the people at Spur, the food joint where I was at, told me they were closing, and I had to find alternative space to sit and wait. I spent the night on those shiny benches in the international departures section. At least this time around, I had a ticket, so I could just tell security in case they gave me any trouble that my flight was delayed. I was consoled by the fact that there were other people in there as well. So I just put on my headphones and listened to Josh Groban's Panis Angelicus, which is Bread of Angels. And I also listened to Bobby McFerrin. Freedom is a voice for the people who are strong. Those are the words, man. And all Gregorian chants, which was a chance for prayer for me. Whenever I felt tired, I would change to my favorite comedians. Top on my list was Trevor Noah and Gabriel Iglesias, the fluffy guy. Around midnight, my mind and body couldn't take it anymore. I slept. More like a bird, actually, because I had to keep one eye open for my luggage. At 4:30 in that following morning, I had managed to get enough shut-eye to start a new day, the day for my first flight to a world unknown. When the check-in booth for KQ, and that's Kenyan Airways, opened at 10 the following morning, I was the first one in the queue with my newly found 360-degree smile. No hassles. They checked me in and told me to proceed to the tickets people. They noticed that on the 12 flight, midday, there was space, which was the one they were checking people in for. And they offered me to take space as opposed to waiting until 5 p.m. I gladly accepted. 7 hours later, I heard, Mabibi na mabuana karibuni Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, which is Swahili for ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. I just touched down in Nairobi. The first part of my trip was done and dusted. Then I had to sit at the duty-free zone for a good 8 hours, waiting for my next connecting flight. 5 minutes before 1 a.m., we boarded Oman Air, and I saw those Arabic ladies I had seen in my dreams. The only difference was that they were not clad in Emirates uniform. The design is the same, but the color is turquoise. And when we got off the plane in Muscat, I heard that expression, Shukra. And when I heard it, I also said, Shukra. After 3 hours at the airport there, we took our final stretch of another 6 hours from the Middle East over India to Southeast Asia and landed in Bangkok after a quarter of a day of nothing else but joy, contentment, fulfillment, and tears rolling down my chubby Zulu bearded cheeks incessantly. Rianhuang Wa Kung Sa Song Ka Tian Huang Bin Kia Kung, which, well, okay, I tried. You'll forgive me. Which is Thai for, we hope you enjoyed your flight. Those were the musical words I heard from the angelic voice, and it dawned on me that my life had just begun. I thank you.